Welcome to Alfred Kazin Notes, a place where literature, ideas, and the minds of great writers come alive. Let's explore the thoughts behind the words. Imagine you were sitting on an airplane that, just took off from Los Angeles, and your destination is New York City.
Okay.
You're cruising along, and the pilot just barely nudges the heading of a plane, like just 3.5 degrees to the south. Inside the cabin, you don't feel a single thing.
Right. It's completely imperceptible.
Exactly. The nose of the plane has shifted maybe a few feet, but as that tiny shift is magnified over the time and distance of the entire continent, you do not end up in New York. You land in Washington, D.C.
It is a striking visual, honestly. It really captures how the mathematics of existence actually govern our lives. When we look deeply at this collection of philosophical notes for this deep dive, we find this central, unavoidable truth. That human identity is not a static monument. It's not, some immovable marble statue that you're just born with. It is a trajectory. And a 1% shift in your daily trajectory, much like that 3.5-degree shift of the airplane, it completely alters the final destination of who you become.
And to you, the listener joining us today, I really want you to think about your own trajectory for a second. Because, we spend so much time obsessing over these sweeping overnight transformations.
Oh, constantly. We want the quick fix.
Right. But the premise we are exploring today suggests that your current identity, like your very sense of self, is actually just the lagging measure of what you have repeatedly done.
Yeah, and if you do the math on that 1% improvement, the compound interest is frankly staggering. If you manage to get just 1% better at something every day for 1 year, you don't end up just, slightly improved.
You end up, what, maybe twice as good?
No, mathematically, you end up nearly 38 times better by the end of the year.
Wow. 38 times.
Yeah. And conversely, a 1% daily decline brings you almost to zero. It's what the literature calls the irreducible unit of existence, the aggregation of marginal gains.
To put some flesh and bone on that math, the sources detail this fascinating real-world example about the British cycling team. And their starting point was, well, it was bleak.
That's an understatement.
Right. Before this philosophy was introduced, British cyclists had endured about a century of just absolute mediocrity, like a single gold medal in decades. They had never won a Tour de France.
It was notoriously bad, to the point where top European bike manufacturers literally refused to sell them gear.
Wait, really? They wouldn't even sell them bikes?
Yeah. They were terrified it would ruin their brand image to be associated with such a losing team.
That is brutal. But then enter a new director, a man named Dave Brailsford. And what's interesting is he didn't come in and demand, a total physiological overhaul of the athletes. He brought in this exact philosophy of the marginal game.
Right. He essentially broke down every single component of riding a bike, and he sought to improve it by just 1%.
Wait, so to cure a century of losing, they didn't just train harder, they looked at fractions of a percent.
Precisely. They redesigned the bike seats to make them slightly more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for just a microscopic improvement in grip.
That's incredibly specific.
But the true philosophy reveals itself in how far into the absurd they were actually willing to go. They hired a surgeon to teach the athletes how to properly wash their hands.
Just to avoid catching a cold.
Exactly, because catching a cold costs training days. They even tested pillows and mattresses, found the optimal sleep gear for each specific rider, and then hauled those exact mattresses to every single hotel they stayed at.
There is one detail in the notes that I just can't stop thinking about.
Oh.
They painted the inside of the team's transport truck completely white.
Oh, right, the white truck.
Yeah, just so they could spot tiny specks of dust that might, degrade the finely tuned mechanics of the bikes.
Which sounds completely obsessive, honestly. Bordering on manic.
It does, but it also completely dismantles our cultural obsession with the cinematic montage.
Yes, absolutely.
We all sit around waiting for this defining, earth-shattering moment where a switch flips and our lives change. We want the movie scene where the music swells and the hero is transformed,
Right. This philosophy tells us that life is actually won or lost in the microscopic, deeply unsexy details.
Right.
When you think about the results, 5 years after these tiny 1% changes were implemented, that same laughingstock British team won 60% of the gold medals available at the Beijing Olympics.
It's unbelievable.
And then they just started dominating the Tour de France.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront how wildly we overestimate the importance of one defining moment and how tragically we underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis.
Okay, so I follow the math, and the cycling example makes perfect sense in hindsight. But practically speaking, if I want to change my life, society tells me I need to set a massive goal.
Sure, that's the standard advice.
Right. If I don't have a finish line in mind, like, say, saving $10,000 or writing a novel, how do I even start? Isn't a life without goals just kind of aimless wandering?
See, this is a crucial distinction in the literature. We are heavily conditioned to worship goals, but goal setting suffers from a massive structural flaw. It's called survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias, what do you mean by that?
Well, we call it a bias because we only look at the survivors, the winners. We look at the Olympic gold medalists standing on the podium and we say, their ambitious goal to win gold is what led to their success.
Right, they wanted it the most.
Exactly. But we completely ignore the thousands of athletes who finished last or didn't even qualify who had the exact same ambitious goal.
Oh, wow. I've actually never thought of it that way.
It changes everything, right?
It really does. If the winner and the loser have the exact same goal, the goal is practically irrelevant. It is a universal constant.
Exactly. The goal cannot possibly be what differentiates the winner from the loser. What separates them is the system. A goal is simply the result you want to achieve. A system is the daily process that actually leads to those results.
And the sources point out a secondary tragedy of living a goal-oriented life, the illusion of permanence.
Yes, the messy room analogy.
Right. Let's say you have a messy room, you hate it, you get a sudden burst of motivation, you spend 3 hours cleaning it, and now you have a pristine room. You achieved your goal. But if you haven't changed the underlying sloppy habits, the system that led to the mess in the first place, 2 weeks later, you're just staring at a messy room again. You treated a symptom without ever addressing the cause.
And there is a heavy spiritual cost to this as well. Goals create a severe either-or conflict within the human psyche.
So?
You're essentially setting a contract with yourself that says, I am unfulfilled right now, but once I reach my goal, then I will be happy. You put your entire emotional well-being on layaway.
You're just waiting to be happy.
Oh, exactly. And if you fail to reach the goal, you view yourself as a disappointment. It restricts your satisfaction to one highly specific, incredibly fragile future scenario.
It's a perpetual state of delayed happiness. And to you listening, ask yourself, are you living in this waiting room? Are you constantly waiting for the next promotion, the next milestone, the next Friday, just to grant yourself permission to feel successful?
That's an exhausting way to live.
It really is. But the beauty of a system is that it allows you to find spiritual value and satisfaction anytime the process is running. The moment you start your routine, you are successful. As the note suggests, true long-term thinking is goalless thinking.
To put it simply, the purpose of a goal is to win the game. The purpose of a system is to continue playing the game.
Okay, but let me push back a bit. If we throw away the goal entirely, what stops me from quitting? Like, if I don't care about the finish line, what fuels the internal fire to keep doing the boring system day after day?
The literature points to the deepest, most fundamental layer of human change identity. Human behavior change operates in 3 layers, much like an onion.
Okay, walk me through the onion.
The outermost layer is your outcomes. So, losing weight, publishing a book, things like that. The middle layer is your processes, your systems, like going to the gym or writing for an hour. But the innermost core, that is your identity, your beliefs, your worldview, and your self-image.
And I think most of us start from the outside and work our way in. We say, I want to lose weight. That's the outcome. So I will follow this diet, the process. And we hope that eventually we become a healthy person.
Right. But the philosophical shift here is to start from the core.
The sources use a brilliant analogy about smoking here. Imagine 2 people who are trying to quit, and both are offered a cigarette. The first person says, no thanks, I'm trying to quit.
Which seems like a perfectly reasonable response,
Yeah,
right?
it does. But it is an outcome-based response. That person still fundamentally views themselves as a smoker who is just currently trying to do something out of character. But the second person declines by saying, no thanks, I'm not a smoker.
It's a tiny shift in vocabulary, but a seismic shift in identity.
Exactly. They no longer identify as someone who smokes. The behavior of smoking is now deeply incongruent with their self-image.
To fully grasp the gravity of this, we should really look at the etymology of the word identity.
Oh, I love this part.
It derives from 2 Latin words, essentitas, which means being, and identitam, which means repeatedly. Your identity is literally translated your repeated beingness.
Repeated beingness.
Yes. This is why behavior that clashes with your self-image never lasts. You might desperately want to be, a wealthy, prolific creator. But if your soul's underlying identity, your repeated beingness, is that of a passive consumer, the tension will eventually snap. You will inevitably be pulled back toward consuming because you haven't changed who you fundamentally are.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit because it sounds a little bit like that old self-help trope where you just look in the mirror and declare, I am a disciplined athlete. And magically you want to go running at 5 a.m.
Yeah, like positive affirmations.
Right. It feels too abstract. Can I just think positive thoughts and become a new person?
No, it isn't abstract at all because you cannot trick your own brain. Belief requires evidence. The human brain actually categorizes unacted upon thoughts as fantasies.
Fantasies, wow.
You cannot just claim a new identity. You have to prove it to your neurology. This is where the daily habits return to center stage. The mechanism of change isn't thought, it is action. Every single action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Like casting a ballot.
Exactly. When you make your bed, you cast a physical vote for being an organized person. When you sit at the piano for 5 minutes, you cast a vote for being a musician. Action is the only proof the brain accepts.
And the beauty of viewing habits as an election is that you don't need a unanimous vote to win. You just need a majority.
That's a huge relief, honestly.
Right. You are inevitably going to have days where you cast a vote for a bad habit. You eat the junk food, you sleep through the alarm. But as long as the majority of your daily votes are cast for the identity you want, the physical evidence accumulates. The internal narrative shifts from fantasy to reality. You don't read a book to hit a quota, you read because you are a reader.
The habit is merely the physical manifestation of the identity.
But if casting a vote is really all it takes, we have to be honest about human nature here. Why do I still fail?
What do you mean?
Well, I want to cast a vote for being healthy, but if I walk into my kitchen and there's just a plate of cookies sitting on the counter, I eat one. I didn't intend to, I didn't want to, I just did. Clearly, willpower and identity aren't enough on their own.
This is where we confront the illusion of free will. We really like to believe we are deeply in control of our choices, operating purely on logic and internal drive. But as your cookie example illustrates, you didn't eat it because of hunger or identity, you ate it because it was there.
Because it was obvious.
Exactly. We are constantly, mindlessly reacting to the physical cues in our environment.
We're just reacting to the spaces around us.
Yes. In 1936, the psychologist Kurt Lewin formalized this with a profound equation. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment. B equals F of P and E.
Okay.
To demonstrate the raw power of this, our sources detail this massive study conducted at Massachusetts General Hospital. A primary care physician wanted to improve the eating habits of thousands of hospital staff and visitors. But she knew relying on willpower was a losing battle.
So what did she do?
Well, she didn't offer any incentives, and she didn't say a single word to anyone.
Wait, how did she get thousands of people to eat healthier without talking to them?
By altering the physical layout of the cafeteria. Previously, the refrigerators right next to the cash registers were filled exclusively with soda. She didn't remove the soda, she simply added bottled water to those main refrigerators and placed baskets of bottled water next to the food stations throughout the room.
So soda was still there.
Soda was still available, yes, but water was now visually prominent and easily accessible. Over 3 months, soda sales dropped by over 11%, and water sales shot up by nearly 26%.
So she didn't change their minds at all. She just changed the physical layout of their world.
Precisely. She altered what behavioral psychologists call the choice architecture. Nobody's internal motivation magically improved. The environment simply made the better choice, the path of least resistance.
The environment acts like an invisible hand. You know, there is another brilliant example of this in the notes regarding the Dutch energy crisis.
Oh, the meters study.
Yes. Researchers looked at a suburb where all the houses were built virtually identical, yet some homeowners consistently use 30% less electricity than their neighbors.
Which is a huge difference.
Massive. When they looked for the variable, they found that the houses using less energy had their electrical meters installed upstairs in the main hallway, where they were highly visible every time someone walked by. The houses using more energy, they had the meters hidden down in the dark basement. When the cue was obvious, the behavior changed automatically.
This concept extends to friction as well. In the 1970s, Japanese electronics manufacturers absolutely dominated the global market, and they didn't necessarily have smarter engineers than their Western counterparts.
So how do they do it?
They succeeded through a principle of addition by subtraction. They aggressively scrutinized the manufacturing environment, hunting for every single point of physical friction, like a tool placed slightly out of reach or an awkward workflow, and they ruthlessly subtracted it. When you design an environment that removes the friction sapping your energy, you achieve vastly superior results with far less effort.
So if you are listening to this, look around your room right now. Stop being a passive consumer of the spaces you inhabit. You have to become the active architect of your world. If you want to practice guitar, don't keep it hidden in a latch case in the back of your closet. Put it on a stand right in the middle of your living room.
Right, make it obvious.
Create distinct spaces, one space, one use. Make the cues for your good habits overwhelmingly obvious, and design your environment so the friction for your bad habits is insurmountably high.
But we must also address the inevitable reality here. Even with a perfectly designed choice architecture, and even with a system of marginal gains voting for your new identity, you will eventually hit a wall.
The honeymoon phase ends.
Always.
You set up the system, you redesign your living room, you were putting in the work for 20, 30 days, and you look in the mirror or you check your bank account and you see absolutely zero results. The initial motivation just evaporates. What happens to the architecture of the soul then?
You have entered what the literature refers to as the valley of disappointment.
I love the metaphor the sources use to explain this because it perfectly captures the visceral frustration of that valley. The ice cube metaphor.
It's a great visual.
Imagine you are sitting in a room that is 25 degrees. You can see your breath. Sitting in front of you on a table is an ice cube. Slowly, the room begins to warm up. 26 degrees, 27, 28. You are putting the time, the environment is shifting, but the ice cube sits there, completely solid. 29, 30, 31 degrees, still nothing. You feel like all your effort is a complete waste, and then it hits 32 degrees. The ice begins to melt.
It is a profound realization about how progress actually works. The effort you exerted from 25 to 31 degrees wasn't wasted at all. It was simply being stored.
Stored energy.
Exactly. This is called the plateau of latent potential. The social reformer Jacob Riis captured this exact phenomenon beautifully. He said he would look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock perhaps 100 times without so much as a crack showing in it. But on the 101st blow, the massive rock splits in two. And Riis knew it wasn't that final blow that did it, but all the 100 strikes that had gone before.
But how do we survive those first 100 strikes? How do we endure the 26, 27, 28-degree days when we are seeing no evidence of our work?
By leveraging the neurology of the human brain through something called the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule.
Yeah. Our brains are wired to release dopamine, the chemical of motivation, when we face novelty and achievable challenge. Human beings experience peak motivation when they work on tasks that are right on the razor's edge of their current abilities. If a challenge is too hard, our neurology registers it as a threat, we face anxiety, and we give up. If it is too easy, the brain stops releasing dopamine, we face boredom, and we quit. We need tasks of just manageable difficulty. Not too hard, not too easy, just right.
The comedian Steve Martin is a fascinating case study of this mechanism in action. When he was rising in the comedy world playing empty clubs, he didn't try to write an entirely new hour of material every week that would be too hard. It would cause intense anxiety. Instead, he expanded his routine by just a minute or two each year. He kept the tried and true jokes that guaranteed laughs, which gave him the dopamine hit of success. But he added just enough new, risky material to keep himself slightly terrified and highly engaged. He constantly walked that precise perimeter of his ability.
And that's exactly how you maintain momentum.
But let's be totally honest here. Even if you calibrate the difficulty perfectly practicing the exact same system, casting the same vote day after day, it gets incredibly dull. We are told by every movie and inspirational poster that we need burning passion to succeed. Isn't a lack of passion the reason we ultimately fail?
That is perhaps the greatest, most toxic, romantic myth of success. We idolize the passionate artist who only works when inspiration strikes. But the harsh, sophisticated truth is that the greatest threat to your success is not failure. It is boredom.
Boredom, really?
Yes. Because when a habit becomes routine, it stops delighting us. The dopamine fades. We start seeking novelty, often sabotaging our own progress just to feel a spark of something new. The difference between an amateur and a professional is stark, and it isn't about talent. Amateurs let life get in the way. They only work when they feel the fire of inspiration. Professionals stick to the schedule regardless of their mood.
They treat it blue collar. They just show up.
They show up. Mastery is not about grand flashes of brilliance. Mastery is fundamentally the ability to endure repetition. If you want to achieve greatness in any endeavor, you have to learn to fall in love with boredom. You must be able to handle the profound monotony of doing the right thing over and over and over again, long after the passion has faded.
That is a heavy, sobering, but beautiful thought to bring this deep dive full circle.
Right.
Your life is not a highlight reel of grand cinematic moments. It is the quiet, invisible aggregation of marginal gains. It is shaped by the systems you build, driven by the identity you vote for with your daily actions, and molded by the environment you construct.
And this leaves us with a final, perhaps unsettling, philosophical provocation.
What's that?
Well, for centuries, literature and science have debated the relationship between the mind and the body. We inherently assume the conscious mind is the master, commanding the physical body to act out its desires. But if our very sense of self, our deep identity, is entirely constructed by the accumulated physical evidence of our smallest, most mundane habits, then perhaps the mind does not control the body at all. Perhaps the body, through the strict, boring discipline of its daily routines, is actually what constructs the mind. Are you the master of your habits, or simply the biological manifestation of them?
A profound question to carry with you. Observe the invisible architecture of your own daily life today. Notice your systems. Notice the votes you are casting. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.